everyone.
How you all doing? Hope you're well. Joe, how are you?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, mate. Good. I've been packing fish and picking fish. Kids' sports day this morning. My boy was dominant. I love it.
Yeah, he seems into sports, your little lad, to be fair.
Yeah, he's inherited my speed. Love it.
Not sure about that one. I don't think I've seen you move fast unless it's with a net, to be honest.
Oh, mate, there we go. You need to come to me 5-a-side on Tuesdays. Sitting all, mate. What's up? We got some Facebook issues again.
It seems all right to me, but
No,
everyone... Oh, here we go. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like... Let me put a post out on Facebook.
Yeah.
It seems like the same thing we were having last night.
Sorry, folks. Seems Facebook doesn't like the stream at the minute. So, yeah, Joe, stick a message out, please,
Yeah,
mate.
will do.
Other than that, folks, it's nice to see a bit of sunshine today. I think I just commented the other day, I think we've had a pretty poor summer so far. With the ups and downs we've had, it's going to be, playing havoc with your temperatures, that is for sure. And, ultimately it's going to affect your growing season because, in stable temperatures like we've got, it's very, very hard to get settled into an intense feeding regime, that's for sure, because you need that real stability in the temperatures in order to do it and build upon it as well. It's no good, 1 week being able to feed more than dropping off, because not only that, you're playing havoc with your filters as well. How you get on with that, Joe? Your heater still off? Are you just ambient?
No, I'm heated, so I'm at 22. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of been steady sailing, to be fair, with the season. The problem that I've had has been more with like parasites and knowing when to intervene. To be fair, that's been my issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's I did have an ambient pond, and yeah, I guess you fish never know whether they're coming or going if you're getting heat like this, and then big downpours of rain as well. If you're not covered, all that rainwater going in and cooling it down and stuff like that. I don't know how much you read into stuff like that with rainwater.
You probably know my answer to that. Right, anyway, folks, so like I mentioned last week, reason for asking Joe to come on, not only does it give me somebody to talk to, so I don't feel like I'm talking to myself for an hour, or however long we do it for, but I just love Joe's perspective, to be fair. Obviously, what is it now? You've been at your pond 2-3 years?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, 2 years.
So I think it's still fair to call you a newbie, mate, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that kind of fresh perspective, I just thought you guys might find helpful when I'm rabbiting away, if Joe kind of catches something that you all might be thinking. And let him fire a couple of his own questions. And it was actually Crafty that mentioned to me, I said, if you're ever doing any staff training with Joe, you should just film it. Stick it out there. I says, well, yeah, we don't really get time, but that is a good idea. I think it could add a lot of value.
Yeah, I just want to learn about this hobby, to be honest. Like that's one of the reasons why I joined Koi Wholesale, to be fair, is just expand my knowledge. I'm obsessed with koi, I think, in the same way that you are, to be honest, and Chris and everybody else. But yeah, I just want to carry on learning and developing my skills so that I can pass it on to other people as well. Maybe down the line at some point. But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about like interrupting a growth season. That's my first question for you, really. How do you actually go about if you see, like, you start your growth season and you're really starting to pile food in? At what point, if you see a fish start to sulk or maybe not, 90% of your fish are all right, but you've got one fish that's off it, do you interrupt your growth season by sticking your net in? I think I've spoken to somebody in Japan. I will message them back and forth about, I think the Japanese methodology is kind of leave them to it, keep feeding. But I guess, if you've got something underlying an issue with one fish, can you let it fester?
It depends what the one problem is, Joe.
Yeah.
Always. So in that case, I mean, there's when they're on heavy food, there are some big do's and don'ts. So any heavy handling could come at a damage, because if they've got a gut full of food, you net them up, you start handling them, it can really screw them up. And I've seen it happen. I never forget having a batch of Momatero fish one year, many moons ago. This one, and I forgot to turn the feeder off. I had a customer come up who was coming for those fish. Netted them up and everything seemed right. Then it can be no coincidence. 3 weeks later, I had fish with serious swim bladder problems.
Wow.
absolutely nothing prior to it. It just exerts a huge amount of stress. But that's heavy commercial netting. That's the whole pond saying netted up and then gone through. Whereas if you're just talking one fish, there's no real issue with that. You might just spook them a little bit and put them off a couple of feeds while they just get back to normal. You might not, but that's it. So if you've got that one sick fish, you've got to investigate it, regardless of the circumstances and what you're doing. You need to investigate it, and then depending upon the results of that is how you deal with it. I.e., if then like a heavy medication's needed, them kind of things. We're talking like maxing out here, 22, 24 degrees, heavily stocked, heavily feeding. At that point, you've got to be careful, obviously, managing your oxygen. So if it was a heavy medication needed, you'd probably want to starve them for 2 to 3 days. Just let the system clean up, then really clear the guts out prior to any meds going in if they're needed. If you do find something on it, it's more than likely going to need a treatment. It's not necessarily going to be isolated to that fish because the problem can spread. If you scrape it and it's covered in flukes, you can't just leave that or ignore that because the likelihood is they're gonna pass. And then you've got your 3 swimming parasites as well that will get into the environment, and the other fish will become food sources for them.
Yeah.
If that is the case, you need to interrupt it, but it's not too bad. The interrupting, Japan, they could have come from it in a different angle. Obviously, mud ponds you can't interrupt. They can tinker with feeding, they can cut feeding off, they can add medication as well, but not in the same way that we can. It's a lot of building up, and it's a process they don't really want to mess up, and there is no stopping. It's fish go in, fish come out one time period. There's no draining the pond, getting in there, doing scrapes, anything like that. It's all guesswork.
Yeah.
Indoors, you see it here. We do multiple selections on ponds. It's just a case we have to prep them properly. That's why I don't just do it willy-nilly. It's always scheduled. So we'll get to the point where we do, if we're doing a selection, they're starved minimum 48 hours in advance. I often tend to go for 3 days. Then they're netted, selected. But obviously in the process of this, we're talking probably 3 to 4 days where there's been no food feeding the filters.
Mm-hmm.
The levels are going to have dropped off, and it's amazing how quickly the filter will drop off in line with it. So then when we restart, depending on the batch of fish, we've got to start then probably over 3, 4, 5 days, even up to a week, rebuild the feed level back up and start readjusting based on a new stocking level if we're taking a load of fish out. So not quite straightforward.
No, it's not. I mean, it's an issue that I'm having at the minute. Like, I think about the issues that I've had with fluke, and I think metals in the water as well. And I think one of the fish that I've got is taking it really bad. Like, it's got multiple splits in its fins, and it's knocked a load of scales off. And every time I catch it, I can pretty much find fluke on it. And I don't know whether that's now like a hard. It's like hosting for the rest of the pond and continuously reintroducing.
Fish like that bother me.
Yeah.
Because that's, they can get to a certain point where, lose a bit of body weight, really just start on a bit of the death spiral almost, to be honest. And at that point, they're just really, really vulnerable. And that vulnerability can just cause you problems that really shouldn't be affecting the others, but it will do.
Yeah. All the others are fine, and I'm back on the food again now. But I think it's almost like because I've been continuously having the netting, the feeding's not right. Like they're very, very skittish, and I just, I'm gonna end up going through this season again, hardly doing what I wanted to do. Because I've had so many, I've had my netting so many times. And it's kind of, at what point do I just say, sod it, I'm just going to stick the feeder on, and what will be, and can I let this fish fester, or am I just going to have to, I'm going to have to do the hard thing, aren't I?
Them sick fish can often, they're really a nightmare for picking costia up.
Yeah.
Just an example, not always necessarily flukes. Vulnerable fish like that can pick costia up really easy. Then before you know it, you've got that in your pond.
Yeah.
That's it's a pain in the arse, mate. I feel you when you're in that kind of scenario. You haven't done your growing pond yet, have you?
No. So it's the next thing on my list, because that's that'd be my get out of jail free card, is to move it to a different system, and then you're isolating it. And if it does, you can really, I guess overtreat or whatever, to try and get it to clear up. But
and this is your issue, fish like that might really benefit from antibiotics.
Yeah.
just opens up another can of worms because you've got to get them.
Mm.
But it really could benefit. They just, like I say, see this with discus. You know, the discus. I don't know if anybody out there has ever kept them. I have, not like intensively. We had them at the shop, but when you got a discus nice and healthy, all the water, everything's nice, it's good. The minute the discus starts losing a bit of body mass, done for.
Yeah.
There's just no coming back from it, and a lot. I see it with a lot of livestock being the same way. And like you said, they're getting that real bad state of repair. What probably would benefit that one fish that you might not want to do with the others, although I see no wrong with it. You've got the water temperature. If you had that, if you could hit 24, 25 degrees, big difference even between that and the 22, and then salt that up to like 0.6% for a couple of weeks. I think you'd find a very, very quick recovery in it.
Wow.
Compared to what you're doing. But then that's the decision you've got to make of, do you want to do that to the pond?
Yeah.
Do that. I don't see any downside to it. Not at all.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show like the importance, one, of, making sure you're making the most out of a full season, and not in, I guess from my point of view, I kind of felt like I did everything right, getting to them to a really healthy point, and it's just deteriorated as soon as the feed started going, and I was really happy, and then you just see this one fish. So I don't know what it is that I've done wrong, and it might just have been like the life cycle of that fish. It could just be it's something internal, or I honestly do not know, because there were no signs of fluke in my system for a long time, but I just can't shift it now. But it is what it is. It could be this copper as well. There's just so many I've got so many questions. But
reoccurring stress factor, that's
yeah,
that me and Andy were talking about, to be honest with Andy Finch. So yeah, interesting one, mate. I just want to remind people, feel free to fire your questions in. I know you have done already, so I am just going to, I think we should probably do a couple of these, John, and I'll come back to you again if you've got another lined up. Peter, Ricky, can you say why all the yellowfish go orange, not stay yellow? Some said it's food and some say it's genetics. Can you say? Yeah, absolutely. So it really is. Genetics are going to play a really big part in this, because I think I mentioned, it might have been last week, about Kiyotsuori. So 2 lineages that spring to mind here as the comparison. You've got Marihiro and Otsuka. Both make stunning Kiyotsuori. However, Marihiro's, if you ask me the two, I know Otsuka's, if I was choosing to raise them, I would generally keep them away from colour food, because I know the colour tends to go a bit too far. And by that, I mean going from yellow to orange. That will be genetics. I don't know, what's in that lineage going way back, but that will be there in that pool. So what happens is, if there's that tendency or that potential in there for that colour to turn that way, when you hit it with colour food, you are going to exaggerate that and speed that process up. There's going to be less of those stay yellow than there is sort of turn orange. Then we turn to Marihiros, for example. I've never seen, the number of those I've seen turn from yellow to orange has been so few, which tells me then genetically that yellow is a more stable and true yellow than the Otsuka one. See it with Karashigoi as well. The Akawa Karashigoi, despite me feeding them heavy colour food, in ponds with Go Sankey, Joel will testify, they just, the pigment just gets more intense yellow. I've not had any turn orange on my watch. The pigment just gets more intense yellow. And that's what I see, the pigment in the scale. It's fascinating to see, just like with Go Sankey, can see the pigment sat in there, and all it's tended to do with the colour food is push that pigment out, but it's been true yellow pigment. So absolutely genetics, and food will only sort of exaggerate a problem or potential issue that's there already. So I hope that helps you there, Peter.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that. Like, the yellow monkeys are kind of bordering on an orange colour as well, aren't they? Some of them have just got different skin pigments, haven't they? And I've seen the Tosai now, some of them develop quicker, and the ones that develop that really orange colour, you tend to release a little bit. I guess it's just that extreme, quickness of.
Gone too far, but generally, again, with them, they keep a real nice yellow colour, which tells me genetically it's a good, strong yellow. The one thing I would advise, Peter, actually, as a follow-on to that, is if you are selecting these varieties at a young age, the paler the better. Always. I think this was mentioned on my Karashi Koi videos that we did, to be fair. And yeah, the paler the better, because there naturally always will be a thickening up and deepening of the colour. So as with Asagi and varieties that are quite sumi dominated, also tend to like paler, would go that with yellow based varieties as well.
What is it temperature related with them as well, with yellow fish? Like Chagoy, I know Chagoy or Chiba can be temperature related. Is it temperature? Can you take I don't know, have you seen that?
Yeah, pigment will naturally always sort of firm and toughen up in winter, as opposed to summer. Benny, it's a yellow, will naturally soften a little bit in the intense heat and growing environment, but it's not the main driver behind it, Joe, ultimately.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
Next one, Grey Fox. Hello, Ricky. I recently got a Dainichi show from a friend who had it for 8 years. Good body line, but a little skinny. Can I still put weight on a koi this old? Gray, I would be curious to know how big it is, but yeah, if it's if he's had it 8 years, is it 8 years old? Is it 9 years old? Where are we at with it? Did he get it in this size? Is it 10 years old? This is a big thing you see when fish get older, especially big fish. So I'm basing this on the fact that it is a big fish already. When they tend to lose the body mass, it can be really hard to recover it, because these jumbo fish getting up to this big size with this huge body volume, it's a process over multiple years of building up that mass. Not just, it's obviously muscle fat, it's everything in there, but mainly that muscle mass that's built up to get there, which once lost, it's a lot harder for bigger fish to get it back. Not only because they're older, metabolism's very different at that point. One of the main issues for me becomes in the sheer amount of food you need to feed them in order to start rebuilding that mass. And then at that point, it's, can you actually physically get that amount of food into them? Even if you can afford to do it, can your filters process it? You're no doubt going to have other fish in your pond. This is where all the problems start lying. So I do often see that in bigger fish, that the minute people kind of lose it, it doesn't often come back. And that heavy feeding, I think this is where the breeders come into their own with the facilities that they've got out in Japan, whether it be very vast indoor ponds where these are raised, or the mud ponds where you've just got insane stocking, insanely low stocking levels and huge amounts of water volume for these things to stretch out in and build that body mass up in. So yeah, it's a challenge. It really is. And I think when you actually do the kind of calculations on this as well with body mass to get the weight, and then you actually work out what it even takes to feed 1% of that body mass per day, scary numbers. Scary numbers. And it is.
Expensive ones as well.
It is. So yeah, I would say possibly, given without any more information, I would say it's going to be quite a challenge maybe for you to fully recover that body mass. Although you should be able to get some back, but whether you can get a lot is another story. Right, we've got Sam there. Sam Wood, hi Ricky. How long before giving up on the battle with Nitrite using salt continuing feeding? And been 3 months now. Yes, love the content being put out. Cheers, Sam. Okay, your obvious learning curve. Sam, yeah, I mean 3 months. Really need to know the levels. To be honest with you, you're going to have a trace Nitrite probably kicking around for the rest of the summer. That's the reality. New ponds take a long time. Nitrite, especially building that bacteria up in that filter, is a pain in the arse. Very sensitive stuff. I believe it's Nitrobacter, if I remember that right. I always tend to get mixed up. Nitrobacter is your bacteria that converts nitrite to nitrate, and it's quite sensitive. It's quite tetchy. Takes a long time to truly establish and stay stable. My concern will be if you've got really, really high levels for a long time, is you might want to be investigating in your system a little bit more, because something might not quite be set correctly. But other than that, I do suspect for the rest of the summer at least, then you're going to go into winter. If you're not heated, everything's going to go a bit dormant. And I would possibly say your next spring as well is going to be a bit of a battle, because you've not quite got that level of maturity in your system before everything fires back up for it to recover like a more mature pond would. So yeah, feel free to drop it in the comments, Sam, and let us know what your readings actually are. But reality is it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's just making sure it's not prolonged too high for too long.
That's similar to one of the questions I asked you when I first came on Question Time, the first time before I worked for you. And yeah, all of a sudden I did see a change. But yeah, it just goes to show I reduced the flow down through my biochamber. I think that for me was like a big thing from a comment you made. And then, I saw
Did it
it.
have an impact? Somebody actually
Yeah.
came back on a comment, I think a few weeks ago, asked, how did you get on with this, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's reducing the flow through my biochamber, but increasing it over the shower.
Yeah.
I think had it was I pretty much saw like a noticeable increase, but also I had been stopping when I saw nitrite, and then stop, hold back on the feed, but then and I was constantly going through this cycle. But yeah, I think there's so many different things at play there, like you say, like what filter it is, and if the filter's not there to actually have the bacteria in it, then you're never going to get rid of it, are you? But there's so many different. It's such an awkward question for you to answer because there's so many
Yeah.
variables. But
A big one I always come back to though is the flow rate,
yeah,
and by association with that, the retention time in the filter, because
yeah,
this didn't just come from the thing. This is years working at my dad's shop, going through the same problem. It almost got to a point. This is right down to people buying box filters and little pressurized canisters, because they were a staple of it was an aquatic shop. So we're dealing with everything in there, and even people's first koi ponds running off systems like that as well. And most of the time, this stuff come from the equipment that wasn't sold by us. People just bringing the problems through the door, having been wrongly sold somewhere else. And as frustrating as that always was, it just got to the point where you could literally just pinpoint the problem every single time. And one of the best ones I remember, and this is a classic. So pressurized filters often get sold as a set, or you can buy them in a set with the pump and the filter. So, and what you'll do is they'll quote the pump based on the size of the filter. So they get this bit right. Say that they're quoting the filter at 20,000 litres as its potential pond size. They'll put a 10,000 litre pump with it, which is paired perfectly. That's going to roughly give you, probably with head loss and stuff like that, probably once every 2.5 hours turnover rate, which for most kind of garden ponds is absolutely spot on. Where do you think the problem lies, Joe?
I guess with the pressure filter, my big worry is it might be separate to what you're discussing, but there's so much detritus going through it, is the blocking up of it, and then the flow rates through that.
It's even simpler than that. So obviously, a lot of people always go with the mindset, I believe, bigger the better. Which with a filter, generally, yes, I agree, bigger the better. So what's happened is somebody with that 10,000 litre pond has decided to buy the 20,000 litre filter, which is a good idea, but then they've got a 10,000 litre pump.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah.
by that, then instantly they're hitting a turnover like once every hour or so, way beyond what they need to be doing in all reality. And that just time and time again we saw it. Or what happened is they'd go out and like I say, even sold them as separates. And some aquatic centre predatory has just tried to sell them the biggest possible pump that they can to get the maximum sale through the till.
Yeah.
And then you come in all of a sudden, and I just remember, I used to be making bypasses up for people and all kinds of things, because all of a sudden, I'm not trying to sell them a new pump. That's an absolute kick in the balls when you've just bought one. But you just got to lose some water somewhere and slow it down through the filter. It's not just the filter. UVs are the same. UVs need contact time.
Yeah.
Do their job. If you're just whizzing that water through at a crazy pace, it's not going to do its job properly. Just slow it down.
Whilst we're on about like flow rates, Nexus flow rates are quite slow, aren't they, in proportion? I mean, I think what is it about? Is it 15,000 litres or something? I'm sure someone will tell us. But if that's for K1 and the water's travelling so quick around the outside of the Nexus, my flow rates in my biochamber are probably triple that. With a very similar media to K1.
Here's your next bit. So that quoted there is probably the maximum flow rate you can push around. And that is based off a nexus being fed by a single bottom drain. It's the most kind of water you can pull and have that system on a gravity basis, still maintain it, or even emptying on a pump fed basis. And this is where everything gets confusing for people. Because it's like, oh, it can handle 18,000 litres an hour. Well, yeah, it can, but that's not right for your pond.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
18,000 litres. And retention time, so there's all various different things out there. But for me, the basis has always been in a normal pond, and for most ponds this is as well, turnover once every couple of hours is going to, generally, if you get that set right, is going to work an absolute treat.
My only worry about having a lower flow rate is if you've got a 4-inch pipe or bottom drain, is if you were only saying, right, I only need an 8,000 litre pump, I'm wondering if there's going to be any settlement at that, or any settlement in a biochamber.
Well, but then this is why you purge.
Yeah.
One way or another, it's why you purge. If you've got a nexus, you're purging when you drain it off and you pull your bottom drain through. That's what that process is there for. But this is where I say all of a sudden you're looking at these compromises, but getting it running right through your biochamber. When K1 kind of came to market, this was kind of thing, you can run higher flow rates through it. I've not seen that happen and work effectively. For me, still, the longer the retention time you can get, and there's loads of different ways you can manipulate it if you want higher turnover. This is what I think I said to you at the time. If you want higher turnover for whatever reason, and I believe it was the introduction of showers into the market where everyone got obsessed with high turnover rates. If you want that, you say you can do it in different ways, different setup, whereby you run a slower flow through your biochamber, and then you have a shower fed separately from that on a different feed that you can pummel water over and increase your total turnover that way, but you still have a slower flow, hence then a higher retention time in your biological filter, your submerged one. That works a treat. That's how the new ponds are going to be built, which I'm actually moving towards some progress on that front, but that's exactly what I'm going for. So it's going to be 4-inch bottom drain to a gravity fed sieve. I'm going to be using more than likely with 150 micron screen inside them instead of the standard kind of 200 or 300s. And then that's going to return over a shower. So that's going to be that main filtration route there, and that's going to be running flat out. So on them, it's not going to be a huge shower because the ponds are not big enough, but that's going to be probably running at 18 to 20,000 litres an hour off of that line. But that plays all of that to its optimum when you think about it. We're pulling the bottom drain pretty hard. There'll still be a purge separately on the bottom drain as well because it's essential. And then, we're working the sieve to its limit and we're getting a good flow rate over the shower. And then there's going to be a bio chamber, again, a fluid bed that's going to be fed from a side drain. There'll be mid-water side drain directly into the bio chamber. The bio chamber will have a flush at the bottom as well, that probably won't be needed. And that will just run on a very, very slow flow on its own independent cycle with the UV back into the pond.
Wow, okay.
I think that's going to be absolutely killer.
Yeah, I'll be interesting to see the side chamber, because I can't think of any examples in the UK where that's been used. The side bio chamber.
It's the underpinning of our systems built in Japan.
Yeah.
Most bio chambers are fed from side drains.
Would you if you're aerating that bio chamber as well? Do you need to even have an air stone in your pond?
I will do, because I just want to max out. Obviously, it's like now 28 degrees. I think water's at 30 degrees again today.
Yeah,
I'm dealing with different problems to other people.
Yeah.
Well, no, we've still got the ponds. If you remember that the first 10 ponds at the minute, even at these temperatures, are running with that spray bar return.
Yeah.
So more than likely won't need to, but I will do, because I'll also be using that air bar at the same end as the shower to generate the current as well. The pond is going to be rectangular shaped, so it's going to be everything I've preached on about, and then a system setup that I believe is going to be the optimum for what it's doing. And when I consider they're going to be around the same, I think about 1,000 to 1,200 gallon approximately. When I consider what we're doing with those ponds at the same kind of thing that have got a brush chamber at the minute, and that it's just going to be different gravy. And I'm also hoping it's going to kind of prove that a drum is not an essential bit of kit for achieving the water and the results.
Yeah, yeah. I think it'd be interesting to see how you, because obviously if you've got the side unit on, how do you go about like lining it or fiberglassing it or whatever?
It's going to be a pre-built fiberglass one.
Right. Okay.
All the drains, everything installed and whatnot as it arrives. So, because to be fair, there's going to be 16 of them all in all. So I'm quite sure Denby won't mind making a mould for that.
That's going to be epic.
We see him as a product line not long after.
I was going to say you need to trademark this. Yeah. Oh dear.
Cool. Right. Let's jump back to some questions and see what we've got.
Yeah.
James Merchant, nice looking pond there in your profile picture, buddy. Hi, Ricky. Would it be beneficial to heat a pond, say 22 for 8 months and 12C for 4 months, or save the money through the winter for 4 months and stay at ambient, then go hard for 8 months at 25C? Well, I'll save you a few quid anyway, because you don't really need 8 months at 22 or 25. 6 months is more than enough to get a really good season in. And then, yes, obviously slowly bring them down after that. 12 degrees is a nice temperature to be sat at over winter, but they can go colder. You know, if it's still kind of burning up too much at that point, you know, I'd be quite happily taking them down to 7 or 8 degrees, which is quite a saving there as well, to be honest with you, James. But yeah, you don't need a full 8 months kicking that out. If you can just kind of build it in, you know, April through to kind of October time as your main growing season, maybe breaching into a bit of November, you'll really get the most from that. And then don't worry about the rest too much. Like I say, there'll be some ambient temperature either side of it holding it up. The bigger thing at the point is if you've got periods either side of that where you say 18 degrees, for example, ambiently, the stability is what's going to benefit you at that point. So if you set your heater at kind of 17, just give yourself a little bit of buffer, because that might be in the spring and the autumn is probably the time when you're going to start having the big drop-offs in the evening, which cause a lot of problems. So make the most of what's happening in the daytime, just to let your heater just stabilise things in the evenings if need be, and slowly keep bringing it there down to the eventual drop temperature that you're going to aim for.
Yeah, I do wonder whether or not like the difference between 22 and 25, how much it actually makes a difference, and how much energy the fish. Like I know from working at your place that like when they get past that 22 mark and they're into like sometimes 26, like they're just zooming around that pond like they're on acid or something.
It's 25 is the magic number.
Yeah.
Obviously more toe side based. Bigger fish, you're not necessarily wanting it as hot, but it is the magic number. You know, and even beyond that a little bit, I say 25, 26, 27, I'll still get similar results. What you do have to bear in mind is the speed at which they will lose weight at that temperature if you're not getting it right. You know, so if you are artificially coming up to that temperature, you've got to get that feeding right, because my God, it can just fall off them.
Yeah.
Base.
I think like that I've seen they're like different animals at that temperature, like the food that they're consuming and the way the you know almost the competitiveness in the feeding is just next level compared to some of the colder ponds that you have in your other you know polytunnel. It's just different gravy. I've seen that difference, but yeah, obviously you know how much it affects growth. In terms of like actual centimeters.
Just when it hits that, then all of a sudden it's that 28, 29, 30, and it's just like, you kind of see the slow off in activity, which I don't, you know, when we know what's going off, I can deal with it, but that's often a cause then, because obviously oxygen saturation, even at that point, 100% saturation at them kind of temperatures, it's not a lot of oxygen being carried in the water.
I guess here's the question. A question on that then: does when you reach them temperatures, is it exposing the weaker fish of the bunch? Like because you're pushing them that bit further and harder, and maybe the Benny as well. You're pushing Benny that bit harder. Does it expose weaker fish to like commercially for you?
No, I mean if it's weaker as in health, the temperature always helps them. Because that is when you're hitting 25, you're hitting optimum immune performance.
Yeah.
And that gets easier. And you got to, as well, when we're at these temperatures, most parasites don't survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't exist at them temperatures, a lot of them. So they've not even got that worry to contend with. You know, the water's doing the work for them, which is, you know, one thing probably not a lot consider. But yeah, Benny, don't get me wrong, Benny don't like it. Sumi don't like it either. It's challenging. That's why I've obviously introduced some shading this year. A lot of the guys in Japan do that as well, actually built into the greenhouse roofs and stuff like that. It's just managing it as well as possible. But don't get me wrong, when you're used to it, it's all good. But when you're not, it can really throw up some interesting challenges, to say the least.
Yeah.
Right, buddy. You got any more questions to throw in, Joe? Just while I have a browse.
I was actually going to ask you about your time work or doing your apprenticeship at NND, because obviously you've touched on being out there, but I actually want to know how much you feel like it's shaped what you are doing now at Koi Wholesale. Because you know, now you've come back and you obviously work in the UK market, but how much do you think it has actually shaped what you've built?
So I think the biggest thing is it wasn't just the summer periods I spent, where it's been an accumulation of all the time. It was constant lessons. Obviously, the years prior to that, Fujo was our agent and guide in Japan. We were just beta breeders, and it was so comical at times, because I still remember it today. It'd make me dad and a guy who used to come with us, dealer from down in Cornwall. It'd make him stand outside while he pulled me to one side to give me a little bit of a lesson about something. Just so funny and comical his ways. So you've got all that kind of build up over time, and just, you know, being there and experiencing stuff, it just allows you to soak it up. And if you're in the right mindset, you have the exposure. That's, for me, what learning is all about. It's an experience, is exposure. You can have 30 years of experience, but if you've never really been exposed to anything or exposed to any problems and stuff like that, that experience is kind of worth nothing.
Yeah.
So there's all this going on around different, you know, you just walk into a breeder's all of a sudden they're doing something, and I just never had an issue. We're going, oh, what's going on here? You know, and that's when you pick all that stuff up. But I think the biggest thing was, that summer, the first time, it's just like, it just changed the whole way I look at it from a raising fish perspective. It was kind of taking it and translating what they did in the mud pond, stuff I never thought of at that point, and then translating that into my regimes here. So it's when all of a sudden Fujo's talking about setting feeding levels, you know, the schedule in between, the time settings in between them. Never thought of it based on, you know, roughly where the fish's metabolism is going to be at. So they're never kind of running on empty. Just really basic, you know, you think, oh, I don't know, but that's, you know, if you've not got that information, how do you know how to pin it together? Because you can overdo it as well. And then it's how they monitored the food. Obviously, they're working with basically like a blindfold on, because the fish are in a mud pond. And it's learning to gauge what they did, how they then studied the feeding levels, just everything. It was really enjoyable work, this, because after a hard day, you've been doing selections in the baking heat and just absolutely wiped out. End of the day, you're going around and you're just sitting at the side of mud ponds, chucking some food in. Yeah. That might be that you go around the time of a feeder. You know, I'll never forget Makoto joking. It was one of the best ponds. And he said, you know, I go there, same day, same time, same car, same clothes, it's everything. But that's literally, you know, stand in the same spot, and that's what they do to then really, really, truly know what the feeding is like from one day to the next.
Yeah.
And assess the pattern in order to make the adjustments, because they can't really see what's in front of them. They've got to really kind of get something and try and gauge the consistency. And just before I come on, one of the ponds feeds 5 minutes before everything else. I think that JBL clock on that feed is running backwards. But that's what it was, a Sakai fish, and that's exactly what I was doing, because the other day I'd managed to get some time monitor them, and they was taking 9 minutes to feed. Today it took them 7 minutes.
Right.
Huge difference.
It's so really interesting.
I'm going to adjust. I need to adjust that feed setting,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll see how they're feeding. It's all right me firing that food in. Are they keen for it? Because if they're not, it's all right me saying, but then I've got to look. Is it really a point now where I want to start putting some more food in? Because they might not actually be that mad for it, or the pond might be looking like it's struggling and can't take it. So they did that, and then we get into the levels of segregation. This was one of the big things, and it's like these guys all of a sudden, like, holy shit, they're looking at absolutely every little detail to try and nick every potential centimetre. So it's like sorry, all in one pond together. Well, at that point, I've not even considered it. I'm like, why are they all together? Well, we don't want to feed colour food. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you've got the pond at your disposal and you can do that, why go and potentially trash the Shiroji feeding colour food? Or potentially bring out secondary colour, feeding colour food. So that was interesting. And then even down to the point of the fish going in. So when we're doing the selection or the culling, all of a sudden we're looking, and I think I mentioned this a few times, we had a separate net for the bigger fish. So like the differential could never be too much. Something incredibly small would be taken out. But then the bigger things, more importantly, their obsession of this potentially 5% of the crop being exceptionally bigger than the rest, how much damage they can do to the overall natural food resource in the pond.
Yeah.
So they'd be taken out and mixed with a bigger size group, and then even up to the Nisai, Tosai segregated even by size brackets of Tosai, and then Nisai, again, not so much segregation on size, but then on variety. Lots of different feeding behaviours. There's no way you would be going and putting Chagoi in with a Pondago Sankey, because their dominance is just going to fuck that right up. So it was just all of a sudden, this was all stuff I had never considered, and then it's like, right, how can I apply that now to my game in order to get the best out of these heel sorry that I'm raising, or these sheer sorry that I'm raising, or this mixed batch of fish that I'm raising. That's it was the big one, really.
Yeah. It would be interesting, like in some multiverse, to see a Koi Wholesale where you didn't go to NND, and if you'd be with all digital testers and
No, I don't think so, because that's a combination of, obviously, before all this, I'd spent a fair few years with my dad, just there along it all, learning from him. And then, it's just, that's what I've just absorbed in Japan. The way they keep fish has always been like, wow, and then just looking at what they're doing and more, really what they're not doing as well. It's just experience. It's just huge amounts of experience. They're reading everything that's going on. I think the minute you're managing a load of mud ponds and you're working blind, you've got to know so much more and be able to see the real small things that probably people wouldn't even consider. Still remember, I've got the picture. One day I went and checked a mud pond just outside of a road, kind of stumbled up, and then he's like, Fujo's getting all stressed, like, oh no, what's going off here? And then a bullfrog had clearly chucked its litter all around the side. So all of a sudden, I'm just like, all right, there's some tadpoles. No, we need to get them out. I'm like, right. So that was it. Next job, we were trying to fumble around in car to try and find some kind of bucket, getting tadpoles out the side of the pond. Because instantly there, again, not considered in that case, all of a sudden they're consuming oxygen, potentially food, natural resources that's going to affect the performance of the koi.
Yeah.
Blanket weed and plantation as well. I saw ponds. The actually breeder shares some ponds on a complex where they are with some, and I just saw them all matted up. He took me up to show me. This pond's got blanket weed again. That's going to be a drain, certainly on oxygen resources at some point, and just all that kind of stuff. So, compared to what them guys are doing, I was one day, I'll never get waded up. I had to go around and netted the blanket weed out and then tie a mud pond before it retreated. I didn't just get all the glory jobs. Some proper shitty ones lined up as well.
Yeah, I bet it was hard work. They work extremely hard, don't they? But they live and breathe it.
Yeah, but it's that, and then that attention to detail. It's that obsession. And if you picked up, that is exactly, when I'm in them fish houses and even when I'm just walking up and down, you might think, what the fuck's he doing just walking up and down? It's just the amount I'm taking in at that point of everything that's happening. and constant little small tweaks when I'm seeing it going on is what accumulates to get them results at the end of the year.
I think it's a mixture of having that eye for picking up on really small details, but also knowing when to be focused on small details as well. Like there's some things that I'll tell you about a fish, a really small detail, and you'll go, "You're just talking a load of shite." And it's you'll pick up on small details with like feeding and stuff like that. You know what to focus your energy and time on like efficiently, and I guess that's what being a Japanese breeder is all about. Like I guess their whole year is so busy and crazy, even when I guess people think it's quiet and all the fish are out in mud ponds and stuff, but it's so finite with the detail, and I think that's maybe the bit that I've picked up, the little bit that I've picked up on. I see you going around and checking all the feed and stuff like that. I don't see you, going around and checking one fish and seeing if it's developed a little, it's just more of a broad approach, but also having like finite details. So it is interesting.
I think the issue is, and I see this a lot on the hobby side of it, some people like to tinker too much.
Yeah.
Dangerous. Some people have too much time on their hands, which leads to too much tinkering.
Yeah.
They need to change things. I get it, the whole thing with gadgets when you're into stuff, all the rest of it, but none of it's actually making koi keeping any better.
Yeah.
I think the maintenance side's probably got easier, but again, maintenance, it's not something you can ever be hands off with because you need to see and understand what's going on.
Yeah.
All the small bits, they're what all build up to that big end result.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, nice question, Joe. I like a trip back down that memory lane, mate, to be honest.
Well, everybody knows that you worked at NND, but I guess you could write a book on all the stuff that you learned out there. But it's just getting these little snippets from you about how you feel like it's helped you create the business that you've got now. I guess is the people that I am interested in that. So
yeah, a lot of it obviously has come from just the own experience of having it as well. It's when you pay attention. I think I did one of my secrets of koi keeping video. I think it might have been episode 1. If you're not seeing it, guys, check it out on YouTube. And it was like the biggest secret. It's not really a secret. It's probably going to be a bit of an anticlimax, this, but observation is key. Observation is absolutely key to koi keeping success. And it's observing everything that's going on and really seeing, like I say, all the small details as well, and acting in a timely manner after that. But if you're not seeing those small details, stuff's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, let's fire back to time's flown there, mate.
I'm interested in this one.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on Sekiguchi Pilgrim in Benigoi? I love them, by the way. I heard it wouldn't grow so big. What's your experience? So, no, I wouldn't expect big growth. I've had them twice. The second time was enough to probably be my last time. And the bit that really frustrated me, in all honesty, was keeping the skin. And not only keeping the skin, that can be a problem with Benigoi. The shimmies just went mad for them. They were really, really insane. And it was just too much. I've not had that kind of level of problem with Dainichi Benigoi, for example. So, for me, that was a pain in the arse. But they are amazing. I can't knock it. Pearl Ginrin, when it's good, is absolutely stunning. As far as I'm aware, it's only him and Kaze that has decent lineages of Pearl Ginrin. But yeah, Sekiguchi just pulls some amazing stuff, and it is stunning. Yet growth-wise, I wouldn't expect it to be that big because you'd think Ginrin struggle to grow, and the level of kind of production that's had to go into making Pearl Ginrin is going to impact them as well. So I've not heard of any Pearl Ginrin jumbo lineages yet, and I think it'll be a long, long time before we do. Because again, their focus, we talk kind of tying into what we've just been saying. The focus there is not on getting size; it's on getting the quality of the Pearl Ginrin.
Yeah.
That's the one and only focus.
I've heard like an old wives' tale about this that the Pearl Ginrin almost burns out in the scales as they get older. Like it can't hold that strength of Ginrin as they get to Nisai or Sanzai.
Yeah, no, up to that. It's just if they get too big, normal Ginrin struggles to maintain as the fish get bigger.
Yeah.
only in few lineages does it really stay strong with size. So yeah, imagine something like Pearl Ginrin. It's going to be a real struggle, but it is honestly when you see it, just
Yeah,
all
they're amazing.
perfectly. It's top notch. So
yeah,
I'd again. Was it just my water that reacted to? Who knows? Benny are a challenge generally, but if there's other varieties, and he does do other varieties, would really recommend it. Kaze is quite good for a kind of Sorogoi, Chiba. I think that's the line he's been focused on with his Pearl Ginrin, but just really stunning.
That feels like a Dainichi thing some year for him to just pick up Pearl Ginrin and go, let's make it jumbo.
Yeah.
It feels like it needs one of the big boys to like stabilize a line with that, doesn't it?
I'd love to see what demand there was for it though.
Yeah.
Peter just coming back on the yellowfish. All the yellowfish have turned orange. Some say it's food, and others you have to expect it. So yeah, just to follow on from that, Peter, it's not, what saying there. I explained all that bit earlier. It's just if they've all gone orange, yes, the food can have an impact. Some foods, depending on the colour enhancers, you have growth foods packed sometimes with like krill meal and stuff like that, and other colour enhancers that aren't spirulina based. They will tend to trash pigment left, right, and centre. I'm not a big fan of them. I don't like them. Colour enhancing foods, I only like pure, very high quality cultured spirulina added to the food because it does the job properly, and it really does focus on red as well more than anything. But yeah, unfortunately, you might need to change your diet there on the fish to pull that back, and it could well be that's tanked it. Depending on what food you've used, I'm not sure. Feel free to let us know.
Yeah.
I think one more, Joe, because I've got two kids I can hear in the background just driving Nanny and Grandad mental.
Yeah.
Which one should we go for?
I'll let you choose.
There we go. Michael Thompson. I'm showing at the Crouch Valley Koi show in 3 weeks. I've done a scrape today and found a few flukes. Going to treat with Learn X Pro. I'm feeding Saki Pure White. Can I continue to feed when treating the flukes? Yeah, I'd probably just be mindful the first kind of 24 hours, probably steer away from feeding. Probably just drop it off in the morning, medicate, and probably drop it back on the next day. Fluke meds don't have too much of an impact because they are kind of just a suspension. They don't really massively impact oxygen levels or anything like that. So I wouldn't be too concerned, Michael. Just give them probably 24 hours and then, get them back on with it. And I think you'll find they'll be absolutely fine. There we go, Joe.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Hope people have enjoyed it.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Hopefully added some value for everybody. And yeah, not much more to say. See you
on the next one.
For the auction.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get some info out, so you figure out what's going on with this Facebook connection.
Yeah. We'll get on the blower to Mark Zuckerberg.
No, I enjoyed that, Joe. So thank you for everybody for tuning in. And like I say, back next week, Wednesday for the auction and Thursday for question time. Again, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Cheers, Ricky. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Oh, God.